I'm Julia Monroe, 32 years old. Last month, I was about to put down a deposit on my very first home, a charming, gabled house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. It was the result of 11 years of non-stop work, juggling 3 jobs, sleeping on a folding chair in a cramped studio apartment, skipping meals, out just to save. I had managed to save nearly $420,000, enough to buy the house, do some renovations, and still have an emergency cushion. But with one click on my banking app, that entire amount was gone. I froze. My account balance was down to a few $100. The transaction history showed a full wire transfer into an account under the name Franklin Monroe, my father. I didn't speak for several minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a wave of cold wash over me, like someone had poured a bucket of ice water down my spine. When I called him, his voice carried no surprise. "Thanks for your naivety," he said, flatly, like he was reporting the weather. "That money will now help Ethan build a more promising future." Ethan, my younger brother, he had just flunked out of college for the second time. You might ask, how did things get to this point? I used to ask myself the same thing, but the truth had been scattered across the 30 years I lived in the Monroe household. I had just never wanted to face it head on. I grew up in a 2-story traditional house in the suburbs of Hendersonville, serene on the outside, a machine of control on the inside. My mother, Linda, was a human resources professional at a major insurance firm. She scheduled everything: meals, homework, extracurriculars, even how long I was allowed to talk to friends on the phone. My father, Franklin, was a financial analyst. He never gave me spending money without demanding detailed logs of how it was used. I once got scolded for buying a magazine without asking. I didn't have my own room until I was 14, and even then, they'd walk in without knocking. My mother called it responsible parenting. To me, it was constant invasion. They controlled how I dressed, what I read, and who I was allowed to befriend. I wasn't allowed to attend summer camps unless they were resume building. But Ethan, he lived on a completely different planet. He was 4 years younger and treated like some kind of reward after a hard life. He had his own room at age 8, got video game consoles, expensive bikes, and was forgiven every time he broke the rules. When Ethan smashed the living room TV in a tantrum, my parents said, "Boys need space to let it out." Meanwhile, I got locked out of the house for coming home 10 minutes late. Maybe that favoritism is what made me so desperate to break free early. I started working at 16, hiding my tips in the back of an old shoe drawer. At 18, I was attending community college while waiting tables. By 19, I had moved out into a shared apartment with 3 roommates, 45 minutes from my parents' house. My dad told me that day, "You'll be back within 6 months." But I never went back. I started saving, not much, but steadily, and I never told them how much I had. I used to think every kid was monitored by their parents like a flagged bank account. But I didn't realize until college that most of my friends could decide simple things: what to eat, what to wear, what to play, without needing a signed permission slip. In my house, every choice had to be approved. I wanted to take a ballet class? No. Too time-consuming, won't help with college. I asked to cut my hair short? Absolutely not. It's not feminine. Every time I pushed back, my mother would pull me into the dining room, where she kept a thick gray folder documenting my non-compliance, like some HR quarterly review. My mother, Linda Monroe, never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her tone was flat, concise, and cut like a 10 p.m. email from your boss. My father, Franklin, was different. He made me feel like a bad investment he needed to cut losses on. If I got a bad grade, he'd open an Excel spreadsheet detailing every penny spent on school, then ask coldly, "Was this worth a C+?" But with Ethan, no one kept score. Ethan had everything I ever wanted. Not the material stuff, but freedom. He chose to play guitar and never practiced. He dropped his AP classes because they were too stressful. He skipped a week of school to reignite his passion for life. Every time Ethan failed, my parents didn't just forgive him. They invested more. He once lost nearly $2,000 of his high school startup's budget. My dad's response? At least he had the guts to try. Meanwhile, if I overspent by $20 on books, I had to file a report. There's one night I'll never forget. I was 17, struggling to finish my college essay for the University of Minnesota, the one school I genuinely wanted. My laptop froze. Ethan, 13 at the time, barged into my room without knocking, as usual. He sat on my chair, munching cookies over my scattered papers, and asked, "Why are you trying so hard?" I held back, because no one here is going to bail me out if I fail. Ethan laughed. "You're overthinking. Mom said they'll always help if we need it." I looked at him and said, "No anger, just cold truth." "Yeah, you're their child. I'm just a passenger on this ship." I don't know if Ethan understood what I meant, but the next day when I got home, my room was ransacked. My computer was locked with a new password. On the desk sat a handwritten note from my dad. "If you want to do everything on your own, start by getting your own computer." I didn't ask. I knew Ethan had said something, and my parents didn't need verification. I walked to the neighbor's house. Miss Doris, a 70-something widow who used to give me pumpkin pie every holiday. She lent me her late husband's old computer. I sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours, finished the essay, and asked to print 2 copies. I got into Minnesota. I didn't say a word to my family the entire summer. My mother hosted a small party to celebrate my acceptance, mostly to show off. She had me give a speech. I stood up, smiled just enough, and said 3 sentences. "Thank you all for coming. I couldn't have done this without those who taught me how to survive alone and a good printer." The room laughed, thinking it was a joke, but my mother didn't. She frowned through the rest of the evening. From that day on, I stopped trying to be the good daughter. I worked in the library, did laundry for others, delivered food on weekends. I never asked them for a dime. But I also never told them I was saving. Every month, I diverted 35% of my paycheck to a separate account, under my own name. No cosigners. No devices linked to the Monroe Wi-Fi ever accessed it. I thought I'd done enough to protect myself, until I realized even when I thought I had escaped, they were still there, lurking behind every trace, every bit of data they'd trained me to leave behind, since I was just a kid who didn't know how to set a password. I started working before I was even old enough to drive alone. My first job was at a tiny cafe called Brewhaven, just 3 blocks from my high school. That's where I earned my first tips, scrubbing espresso machines and pretending to smile through gritted teeth while waiting on table 5. I hid those early tips inside a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice, cut with a razor blade under the dim glow of a borrowed desk lamp. My dad once said, "Working too young will make you neglect your studies." But I didn't need his approval. I needed a way out. At 19, I moved out. No goodbye, no tears, just a cold text. "I'll be fine. Don't come see me off." I took a Greyhound bus, 2 suitcases full of old clothes and a set of cookware my mom had saved for Ethan, but I borrowed it. I moved to Raleigh for the University of North Carolina, where I had a partial scholarship in information systems. I lived in a damp ground floor room and turned myself into a ghost. I cooked late at night to avoid waking others, worked the tech help desk from 5 to 8 a.m., then studied till dark. On weekends, I fixed computers for nearby residents. There wasn't time to feel lonely. I became a machine, cold, precise, unemotional. For 4 years, I never went home. Every holiday, I stayed in the dorms or worked overtime. Ethan once emailed asking if I'd come home for Christmas. I didn't reply, because I knew if I did, I'd just be another number in Dad's spreadsheet. At 23, I graduated with honors and got a job at a small cybersecurity firm called Sentinel Logic. The pay wasn't great, but it gave me freedom. I saved 40% of every paycheck. I still rode the bus, wore thrifted clothes, turned down lunch invites. Within 3 years, I had saved over $100,000. But I didn't stop. Every tax return, every bonus, every side gig, straight into an isolated account. No shared logins, no linked devices. That was my mother's lesson. If someone has access, they have control. Everything shifted when I met Leah. We met at a tech seminar in Charlotte. She was a UX designer, smart, calm, and had this way of looking at me that made me feel seen, not measured. We debated personal finance app security for hours, then ended the night over beer and a smile I carried with me all the way home. We started texting, then video calls, then, 8 months in, we moved in together. Leah was the first to ask, "Do you actually want to own a house, or is that just how you prove to your parents you don't need them?" I paused for a long time. Then I said, "Both." Leah didn't try to talk me out of it. Instead, she helped me reframe the goal. 3 bedrooms, a small home office, a sunny kitchen, and a backyard garden for basil and mint. Things I once wrote off as unnecessary. She was the first person who said, "You deserve a life you don't have to shrink to fit." We started house hunting. We saw at least 15. I rated each one with a custom encrypted checklist, like coding an algorithm for happiness. And then we found it. A quiet bungalow tucked down a maple-lined street. Price $405,000. Almost an exact match to what I'd saved over a decade. Leah squeezed my hand as we stepped out of the sunlit kitchen and whispered, "If you don't do this now, you'll never believe you're worthy of it." I smiled, I believed, and maybe that's why I didn't see the warning signs. Because I'd started to believe I could finally live without always looking over my shoulder. Until I discovered the one watching me never really stopped. I still remember that Sunday afternoon, not because of the sunlight, but because of the chill that ran through me when my father said, "The granite-tiled kitchen in that house is a bit dark. You should consider the lighting." I froze, my fork still holding half a roasted potato suspended between plate and mouth. Leah looked at me, puzzled. My mother casually sipped her wine as if nothing unusual had just been said. I had never shared any details about the house with them. No photos, no texts, no phone calls. I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked as lightly as I could, "How do you know about that kitchen?" My father shrugged. "You must have mentioned it on the phone last week." But last week I had said exactly 2 things. I'm considering a house on Grove Street, and I haven't made any decisions yet. I didn't mention the kitchen. Especially not the cool gray granite with silver veining, something you could only see in person. From that moment on, I started paying attention. 3 days later, I got a notification from my banking app. Login confirmed from a new device at 3:17 p.m. I was at the office at that time. My personal laptop was at home. No one else had my password. No one had biometric access. I immediately changed all my credentials, enabled 2-step verification, and called the bank. "We detected a login from an IP address in Asheville," the support rep said. "It doesn't match your saved devices." I asked them to temporarily freeze my account and requested the login history for the past 30 days. They emailed me the report within the hour, and I went numb. There were signs of repeated access every 3 to 4 days, going back 6 weeks. That night, I opened my personal laptop and ran a full security scan. The basic results showed nothing, but when I used our company's specialized deep scan malware tool, everything came to light. A hidden process was running, disguised as a system monitoring tool, but when I opened the internal code, it was clear. Keylogger, screen capture, and a microphone-based recording module. My whole body went cold. Leah walked in, saw me frozen in front of the screen, and asked, "What's going on?" I pointed at the lines of code. "Someone's been watching everything I do on this machine, every bank login, every email, even the floor plan I saved yesterday." She blinked. "How did that get on your computer?" It took nearly a full minute before I remembered. 4 months ago, my laptop started lagging after an OS update. During a brief visit home, a night when I gave in after my mother begged, my dad offered to clean up the system and reinstall drivers. He took my laptop into his office for nearly 2 hours. I remember being in the garden with my mom, pulling weeds from flower beds I didn't care about. When he gave it back, the machine ran smoother. I had thanked him. I had been foolish. I immediately used Leia's laptop to log into my bank account, and my heart sank the second I saw the balance, 74 cents. I checked the transaction history, one transfer made the morning before, for the full amount of $418,263.14. Everything I'd saved over 11 years, sent to an account labeled F. Monroe Holding. No bank created a corporate account under that name without showing me exactly who was behind it. Leah said nothing. She held me as I gasped for air, as I cried uncontrollably, as I pounded the table like a child who had just lost her mother. I nearly screamed. I was careful. I was so careful. I didn't use any home device. I didn't share any passwords. How did he do this? Leah gripped me tighter. Because you never thought he would. But Julia? He did. And we're going to get every last cent back. I held her hand. Everything around me had collapsed, but in Leah's eyes, I still had a place to start over. I stayed up all night. Leah had fallen asleep on the couch, her laptop still open, its glow casting light on the only face in the world that was still on my side. I couldn't close my eyes. In my mind, the transfer record played on repeat. F. Monroe Holdings, and that staggering number, $418,263.14. I had done everything right. I'd been financially independent since 16, never took a dime from anyone. Every dollar I saved was tracked in spreadsheets, each with a purpose. Every dream I dared to build laid on a foundation of sacrifice. And yet, with a single hidden line of code, he had taken it all. I called my father 6 times. No one answered. I texted, "I know everything, call me back now." Then emailed, then called again. By the time the sun rose, I knew they wouldn't respond. Unless I showed up at their door. I didn't tell Leah I was leaving, only left a note. If I'm not back in 3 hours, call the police. The Monroe house still looked as pristine as ever. Well-trimmed maple tree, American flag hanging just right. My father's SUV parked straight in the driveway. Nothing about it screamed crime scene. But I knew inside those walls, everything I'd built over the past 11 years was being repackaged into that disgusting phrase, family resource management. I didn't knock. I had a spare key. My mother was at the breakfast table, reading the paper, tea steaming beside her. She looked up like I had just dropped by for a visit. "Julia, you're up early." I cut her off. "Where's Dad?" He was in his office. When I opened the door, he was removing his reading glasses, smiling like some wise old movie dad. "You're here early." I didn't sit. I didn't breathe. "My bank account, you drained it." He tilted his head, as if waiting for me to continue. But I just stood there, waiting for any sign, shame, guilt, anything. There was none. "You're too young to understand this, Julia," he said, voice as flat as a machine. The money was used appropriately to support Ethan's foundation. I let out a laugh. Dry, hollow. "You call that a purpose? Stealing from your own daughter to fund the son you spoiled into incompetence? That's your version of financial planning?" My mother entered just then and quietly shut the door behind her. "Julia, lower your voice. You don't understand. We did this for the family's future." "Emily?" I clenched my fists. "You never saw me as part of the family. I was just a tool, a walking ATM. My father remained calm. "We're simply reallocating resources. Ethan was just accepted into a national startup incubator. This investment secures our long-term future. A house, Julia, it only anchors you." I stared at him. "Your daughter is an adult independent with a stable career and a real plan. Ethan is a 28-year-old man-child who's never held a job longer than 3 months. Tell me again, who's anchored?" My mother reached for my shoulder for the first time in years. "Don't see this as betrayal. Your father was only trying to protect you from a bad decision." I pushed her hand away. "You hacked my accounts. Installed spyware. Under federal law, that's a violation of privacy and financial fraud. That's not protection, it's a crime. My father folded his arms. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own parents. I looked at him for a long time. In that moment, I wasn't the 15-year-old girl who got yelled at for spending $10 on books. I was a woman with intelligence, with evidence, and with resolve. You have 48 hours to return every penny. If not, I'm going to the police, and I won't be going alone. As I turned to leave, I saw my mother trembling, not from the cold. Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed. Are you serious? He croaked. You don't have to answer, I said as I stepped out the door. But if you keep that money, then you're no different from them. I walked into the sunlight without looking back. I left the Monroe house with my heart pounding like a war drum, but my face gave nothing away, not because I was calm, but because I had been preparing for this moment for over 2 months. I got in the car, locked the doors, pulled out my phone, and hit send. A 37-minute audio file, my full confrontation with my parents from start to finish. Uploaded directly to the emergency folder in a hidden Google Drive account Leah had helped me set up. It was also shared with my tech attorney, Mr. Terrence Roth, and a cybersecurity specialist I'd privately hired to handle the spyware on my laptop. Because my father was right about one thing, I wasn't going alone. Back home, Leah was waiting. I opened my laptop and logged into the secondary bank account, where I'd quietly moved most of my funds after spotting early red flags. The balance was intact, $351,274.33. Only $39,000 had been left in the compromised account, and I had left it there on purpose. You planned for this? Leah asked, stunned. Never trusting completely, I nodded. Is the first lesson you learn growing up in a household that demands quarterly financial updates? I sent Terrence the bank statements, all the screenshots, the spyware code I extracted from my laptop, and the transaction logs. By the end of the day, he called back. Half disbelief, half admiration. Julia, this isn't just a state violation. They've breached at least 3 federal statutes. If you're willing, we can file both civil and criminal charges. I didn't hesitate. Do it. 2 days later, I walked into the Asheville Police Department with Leah and Terrence. There, I filed an official complaint with all supporting evidence. Unauthorized logins, malicious code, the audio recording. The officer in charge, Lieutenant Davis, sat silent for a long time after reviewing everything. He said, we see a lot of cases where kids steal from parents, but rarely the other way around. I looked him straight in the eye. That's probably because most victims lack proof or they're used to swallowing it. I'm not. I didn't expect Ethan to show up the next day. He came to my door looking pale, gaunt, like someone fleeing the very world that had once coddled him. Are you really taking them to court? I nodded. No need to explain. I didn't know, he said. I thought it was some fund they'd set aside for me, but when I asked, Mom admitted everything. I said nothing, let him hear his own voice. I don't want a cent from them anymore, Ethan said quietly. And if you need a statement, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth. I didn't trust him immediately, but Leah glanced at me, then nodded. He's telling the truth. I thanked him, made no promises, because at this point it wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about me. And not letting anyone rewrite my life story with well-rehearsed excuses. Within 2 weeks, the court accepted the lawsuit. My parents were served with subpoenas listing the charges: theft, violation of personal privacy, unauthorized system access, and installation of spyware without consent. They hired an expensive lawyer, triple-breasted suit, wire-rimmed glasses, voice smooth as oil. He didn't deny the spyware, but argued that it was a financial oversight measure to protect the daughter from making poor asset decisions. I almost laughed in the pre-trial room, but I didn't have to argue. I opened my laptop and played the video Leah had secretly recorded, showing me uncovering the spyware and the command lines linking my computer directly to my father's IP address at the exact moment of the bank transfer. Motionless evidence, but it said everything. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. I knew they'd try to delay it, cloud it, distort it, But this time I had walked the full length of trust and come back with the one thing I couldn't afford to lose again: my dignity. The first hearing took place on a gray autumn morning at the Buncombe County Courthouse. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside my attorney, Deborah Klein, a sharp-eyed woman from New Jersey with a voice like a paper cutter and a stare no one held for more than 3 seconds. She was Terrence's recommendation, and within 5 minutes of our first meeting, I understood why. Deborah didn't care about feeling. She cared about results. Across the aisle sat my parents, looking polished and composed beside their attorney, Andrew L. Griggs, infamous for his moral reversal tactics in family lawsuits. I'd prepared for every dirty move. Deborah opened with a single, precise line. "Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is a series of calculated, deliberate, and unlawful actions: unauthorized surveillance, theft of personal funds, and illicit access to banking systems. Our first piece of evidence, Leah's video capturing my discovery of the spyware, complete with timestamps matching logins from my father's home IP. Next, a signed statement from the cybersecurity director at Sentinel Logic, my employer, confirming the software's non-commercial nature and high-level security threat. But the first blow that truly landed came from Dave Richards, branch manager at my former bank. On the witness stand, he carefully turned each page of his file. Miss Julia Monroe came to our office nearly 2 months ago and requested a secure transfer of her funds to another institution. She explicitly asked for full confidentiality and no digital trace. It was a legal request, executed per protocol. My father's face turned from white to ashen. He knew the narrative they had planned. Julia, being financially reckless and overreacting to parental oversight, was cracking. I took the stand next. I told the truth. No embellishment, no omissions. How I'd saved every dollar, how I was monitored without consent, and what it felt like to be robbed by the people who raised me. I didn't need to cry. My hurt lived in the silence where trust used to be. Their lawyer, as predicted, painted me as emotionally unstable, paranoid about her family, and being manipulated by her live-in partner. Deborah just smiled. If protecting your assets, planning your finances, and rejecting surveillance are symptoms of instability, maybe we need to redefine what responsible citizenship looks like. On day 2, Ethan arrived. He had already submitted his statement, but seeing him stand in court across from our parents was something I hadn't dared hope for. "I never asked for money," Ethan said, his voice shaky but steady. "When I found out my parents took it from my sister for me, I said no. They told me if I refused, I was betraying the family. I still refused." His voice cracked. "And if I have to choose between my conscience and my parents, I choose my conscience." No rebuttal came from the defense. They knew. They just never believed I'd bring it all into the light. The hearing closed on a Tuesday morning. Judge Karen McAllister, a seasoned African-American jurist with a reputation for clarity in tech civil cases, delivered her verdict in just 40 minutes. This court finds the defendants guilty of violating personal privacy, committing theft, and evading legal accountability through the guise of moral family obligation. The defendants are ordered to repay the $39,000 taken, plus $50,000 in damages for emotional distress, financial disruption, and legal expenses. I didn't smile. I just exhaled, truly and fully. For the first time in months, no longer counting every dollar, every login, every breath. My parents didn't look at me as they left the courtroom. My mother hid behind dark sunglasses. My father adjusted his tie. But I knew what they truly lost today wasn't the money. It was the right to ever again say, "We only wanted what's best for you." 1 week after the trial, I received a bouquet at the office. No card, no message. Just a printed note. "We hope you'll reconsider. Family is always family." I didn't need to see who sent it. The choice of white lilies mixed with baby's breath said it all. It was my mother's go-to arrangement when she wanted to keep appearances without lowering herself. I handed the bouquet to the receptionist. "Give it to the waiting area. Don't bring any more up." I knew they'd keep trying, emails, desk calls, mutual friends nudging me to forgive for peace of mind. But what they didn't understand, or refused to understand, was that I wasn't angry anymore. I simply no longer allowed them access to my life. I changed all my bank accounts, cut off everyone who used to relay messages between us, and moved into a new apartment on the east side of Asheville, where the morning light hit the kitchen Leah and I designed together. I wasn't in survival mode anymore, and I no longer needed to hide my money in secret accounts. Sentinel Logic, where I had been a mid-level security engineer, offered me a new position, team lead for a project focused on protecting personal digital privacy, especially in cases involving surveillance from within one's own family. That offer came just a month after I posted a detailed article about my experience on a Women in Tech forum. I didn't name anyone, but every detail was real. And it spread faster than I expected. From there, speaking requests followed. First, internal conferences in the cybersecurity field, then universities, eventually financial freedom summits for independent women. The topic never changed. Privacy begins when you stop letting family control your passwords. Once, after a talk in Raleigh, a woman in her 50s approached me, trembling. My daughter once called me controlling. I didn't understand until I heard you. Now I know why she left. I said nothing, just placed a hand on her shoulder and walked away. A part of me wanted to say, there's still time, but I also knew some wounds don't need more words. As for Ethan, he did what I never thought he'd have the courage to do. He moved out. He rented a small apartment near his business school in Charlotte, juggling studies and a part-time barista job. When I visited him that first month, he was trying to cook dinner with a pan that stuck everything. No one warned me how hard and lonely living alone would be. I smiled. Then you're doing it right. We didn't talk much about the trial. Ethan never asked whether I'd reconcile with our parents, and I didn't need to say aloud that for the first time we were truly siblings. No referees, no golden child, just two adults learning to exist outside the shadow of the family name. Leah and I got legally married 3 months later. No wedding, no ceremony, just a quiet winter morning at the county clerk's office, with 2 close friends as witnesses. We walked home afterward, hand in hand, just quiet enough for no one to interrupt. I hung a copy of the court ruling in my office, not to brag about winning, but to remind myself. Freedom doesn't begin with a court victory. It begins the moment you dare to say enough. Some still call me cruel, that suing your own parents is unthinkable, but I don't live inside their imagination. I live with the truth I had to grow up with. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you once called family. One night, while teaching a virtual class on digital privacy, a student raised their hand and asked, "Do you think you went too far? I mean, they're your parents." I looked straight into the camera. "Sister, they are my parents, but I don't belong to them. I belong to myself." And I had to go a long way to reclaim that. One spring morning, just after I finished tending to the lavender pots on the porch, Leah stepped out with a silver gray envelope in her hand. She said nothing, just handed it to me and returned to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh waffles was beginning to fill the air. I recognized the handwriting, neat, slanted slightly right. It was my father's. I never expected a letter from him. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever receive one, but I opened it because I no longer feared it could take anything from me. To Aaliyah, if you're reading this, it means I've learned not to check someone's email history anymore. And maybe it also means I'm ready to admit you were right. Not because the court said so, but because I finally know it deep inside. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that in the end, I understood what it means to cross a line and what it means to lose a daughter because I thought I had the right to keep her at any cost. No drama, no rambling, just one printed page signed Franklin. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't tell Leah. I didn't have to. Forgiveness, if it ever came, wouldn't come through a letter. It would come through him learning when to stay silent. how to show up the right way, and when to step back. A few weeks later, we bought our dream house, a modern farmhouse with white walls, a gray roof, wide windows, and a wooden fence Leah and I painted ourselves over 3 days. It had a study with built-in shelves, a sunlit kitchen perfect for spontaneous baking, and a backyard big enough for both a vegetable garden and a cozy table for friends. Right where the sunlight streamed through the skylight every morning, Leah placed a navy velvet box on the table, next to a cup of coffee and a smile that stopped my breath. No orchestra, no roses, just me and this house, if you want it. I didn't need to think. He once said, "You'll come crawling back in 6 months." It took me 11 years. But Leah, I'm finally home. We threw a small party. Our kind of celebration, with apple pie, acoustic guitar, a few close friends, and Ethan giving a toast that nearly broke me. When I was a kid, I thought Julia was just weird. Now I know. She was the only one brave enough to live honestly, and because of her, I learned how to be honest too. Thank you, sis. Life after that wasn't perfect because I no longer believed in perfect. Some nights, the old memories still woke me up, drenched in sweat from a surprise doorbell, but I had Leah. I had the freedom I fought for, and I had a job that gave me a reason. Every time I helped someone reclaim their account, I reclaimed a piece of myself. A year later, I was invited to speak at TEDx Asheville. The talk was titled, "Privacy Doesn't Begin with Technology. It Begins When You Stop Apologizing for Your Boundaries." It ended with a long-standing ovation I still feel every time I step on stage. I never replied to my father's letter, but that Christmas I sent a card. No name, just one line. No one has the right to control another person, not even the one who gave them life. I no longer live to be accepted, I live to choose whom I love, where I stay, whom I trust, and what dreams I build. Money can be stolen, memories can be twisted, but the ability to steer your own life, once reclaimed, can never be taken from you again, if you have the courage to hold on to it with both hands. Julia's story is a powerful reminder that family ties should never be used as an excuse to control or violate someone's privacy. In real life, many people grow up in toxic households and still feel guilty for setting boundaries. But the truth is, you're not selfish for protecting your assets, your dreams, and your dignity. Freedom isn't just having money in the bank. It's the ability to live by your own values, no matter who once tried to define you. What do you think about Julia's journey? Would you have the courage to stand up for yourself like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, true-life family stories. My name is Josephine, 36 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. I've been married to Elliot for 8 years. Strange as it sounds, all that time, I felt like a guest who overstayed her welcome in the Morgan family, my husband's family. They weren't overtly cruel. They greeted politely, smiled at parties, and mailed birthday cards on time. Yet somehow I always felt unnecessary, lonely in my own marriage, surrounded by people who used the word family so fluently. I'm a self-employed brand designer, not flashy or headline-worthy, but I love what I do. What I couldn't get used to was the look in my mother-in-law Lydia's eyes every time I mentioned a client instead of a boss, or the smug smile from my sister-in-law Melissa when I wore a self-made dress to the Christmas party I endured. For 8 years, I thought that if I were patient and kind enough, they would eventually accept me. I memorized everyone's birthday, picked gifts they liked, even forced myself to learn the exact martini mix that Howard, my father-in-law, preferred. Elliot always said they just need more time, you're being too sensitive. And I believed him. Until that 4th of July BBQ last year. Every summer, the Morgans host a grand barbecue. Neighbors, colleagues, old college friends all invited. For them, it's a moment to assert status, build connections, and, of course, show off a little. That morning, I got up early to bake lemon bars, my grandmother's recipe, the only thing Lydia once mildly praised as not bad. I picked a cream linen dress that Elliot called neat and proper, tied my hair up, and wore nude lipstick. Not too flashy, not too plain, just enough. When we arrived, Melissa ran to hug Elliot like always, then gave me a once-over with that same judging gaze. "You look simple," she said. "I'm guessing it's that rustic elegance vibe?" I smiled, swallowing the urge to say, "And what are you—" "Gaudy and forgettable." 3 hours in, everyone gathered around the patio table. Elliot talked investments with his dad. Melissa bragged about meeting a director in LA. I took the chance to mention a recent branding project I'd completed for a local coffee shop. The first time I felt confident enough to share something with them. "It's opening next week," I said. I handled the full brand identity, from logo to menus. Before I could finish, Melissa set her wine down, leaned in, and smirked. "You know, if you disappeared from the planet tomorrow, no one would even notice. You do realize you're boring everyone to death, right?" The table burst into laughter. Elliot laughed along, like a reflex. Lydia chuckled behind her napkin. Howard laughed out loud. And me? I just stared at Melissa, lifted the skewer in my hand, and said clearly, "Well, let's find out, shall we?" Silence dropped over the table like a cold wind. Melissa stopped laughing. Elliot looked confused. No one spoke. Until Lydia broke the tension with, "Howard, your turn to carve the brisket." I didn't need another bite. No one asked. Elliot was busy helping his dad with the grill. For the rest of the evening, I sat quietly. No smiling, no small talk. I just observed. I watched how they patted each other on the back, smiled, and chatted like a genetically synced tribe, where I would always be the outsider. I watched Elliot, my husband, the man who once promised to always stand by me, now just one of them. That night, as Elliot stepped into the shower, I packed my laptop, notebook, passport, and a few clothes into a small suitcase. On the kitchen counter, I left a handwritten note. "I'm going to disappear for a while. Don't worry, and don't look for me." No anger, no tears, just a decision made after 8 years of silent erasure, as simple as the way they had made me invisible all along. I was born and raised in a small town near Boise, Idaho, where winters cracked your skin and summers left no room for idleness. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad died in a car accident when I was in 4th grade. I learned early, if you want something, you get up and build it yourself. I started drawing in high school, working part-time at a bakery, teaching myself Photoshop on an old beat-up laptop. College came from a full scholarship and TAing 3 courses. No one paved the road for me. Maybe that's why Elliot was drawn to me. We met at a community design seminar hosted by the architecture department. He walked in wearing a Brooks Brothers shirt. I was helping print materials for the organizers. He asked what I thought about the newly renovated City Hall building, and we debated for almost 90 minutes. He said I had a fire, something he claimed was rare in a world full of PowerPoint people and spreadsheets. 3 months later, we moved in together. A year after that, we had a lakefront wedding in Vermont, 120 guests, a live string quartet, and a 3-course menu by a private chef. I still remember standing in the middle of that reception, wearing the expensive dress Lydia picked for me, looking around and thinking, this isn't my world. But maybe I can learn to live in it. I was wrong. The Morgans, my in-laws, and Elliot's sister never insulted me directly. They wrapped their comments in politeness, sugar-coated just enough to leave no room for confrontation, and slowly, I started shrinking without noticing it. "Oh, Josephine, you work from home? Must be nice, not having to deal with rush hour traffic. You bake these yourself? How wonderful that you have so much free time. Did that client pick you because Elliot introduced you?" When I received a local emerging designer award, Lydia said, "Oh, I saw that award last year. It's one of those community voted ones, right? Cute." Howard once gave me a book titled Real Success: Classic Business Principles for the Modern Woman, saying, "Something to help build a bit of foundation, dear." I smiled. I always smiled. I kept believing that maybe if I worked harder, behaved better, they'd finally see me differently. But one thing they could never quite hide was this. They saw me as temporarily acceptable, never truly worthy. Melissa, Elliot's sister, made it most obvious. When Elliot gifted me a commercial printer to start my design studio, Melissa asked, right in front of me, "Did you buy it yourself or was that Elliot's money?" I looked at Elliot. He just chuckled and said, "She's just joking. Don't take it so seriously." That line, "Don't overreact, don't be sensitive," they didn't mean anything by it, was the chorus of my marriage. And if you hear that enough, you start wondering if maybe you are the problem. At first, I'd tried inviting Lydia to lunch. She declined politely. I suggested a family trip. Elliot told me, "You wouldn't enjoy their kind of vacation. Golf and conferences. You'd be bored." Melissa, whenever she had the chance, would pull Elliot aside and whisper, "Don't you think she seems tired of our family? Maybe she's one of those girls who only fits in small town life?" And Elliot? He stayed on the sidelines. When I said Melissa's remarks were inappropriate, he'd just say, "She's always been like that. Every family has someone difficult." I wasn't a child. I didn't need them to love me like blood, but I had hoped, at the very least, they would treat me as a real part of their lives, not just a background prop in their family photo. Then last year, I lost a major contract because Elliot asked me to push a deadline so I could fly with him to a Charleston event. "It's just a few days," he said. "You can work anytime." I lost that client, a sustainable fashion brand I'd been chasing for 6 months. Elliot didn't apologize. He just said, "There'll be other projects. Family still comes first, right?" I nodded, but something inside me started to crack. A fracture, waiting to split open. And that day, when Melissa said the world wouldn't notice if I disappeared, I finally understood. The fracture had gone too deep. It wasn't the joke, it was everything. Every tiny wound stacked over 8 years. I didn't disappear. I just stopped existing in their world. I don't remember exactly when I started crying that night after the barbecue. I just remember boarding the early morning bus from Portland to Spokane, where my sister lives, with puffy eyes and a tight grip on a small rolling suitcase filled with a few clothes and a hard drive containing all my client files. I had no plan, just a need to leave, right now. Because if I didn't, there'd be nothing left of me to hold on to. The sad thing is, this wasn't the first time I'd felt myself disappear. I'd been fading slowly, year by year, since I walked into the Morgan household. There were times I didn't even recognize the woman in the mirror. The woman who once confidently pitched designs to investor panels now struggled to speak at a family dinner. I used to have friends, used to laugh freely, used to argue with passion. Now I just stayed quiet. I still remember the moment everything truly began to unravel. I was 6 weeks pregnant. It was unexpected, but to me, a joy. I felt excited, already reading parenting books, jotting down every change in my body. I hadn't even told my mom yet, but I told Elliot. His reaction? "This really isn't a good time, Joe. You've got a tight project deadline, and my family's prepping for the Florida trip. If you don't go, you'll just fall further out of favor with Mom. Are you even sure?" I said nothing. That was his response to becoming a father. Not panic, just annoyance. I went to the first prenatal appointment alone. Waited over an hour. Got blood drawn, had my pressure checked. Waited some more. No one held my hand. No one asked if I was okay. By week 8, I was bleeding. I spent 3 hours in the ER. I didn't even call Elliot. When I got home, I texted him. I miscarried. He replied, "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk tonight." That night, he brought home takeout and asked if I could eat. No hug, no real question. A week later, Melissa sent me a link to an article about how stress affects pregnancy, followed by a sad face emoji. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Not worth it. Only Tessa, my sister, called me every night. She listened to me cry, told me to stop blaming myself. When I said I felt hollow, she gently said, "You've been robbed of everything a mother should feel. And the worst part is, no one around you even cares. That's not your fault." Tessa's words were the first real wake-up bell. I started looking at old photos. I used to go hiking every month. I painted murals for orphanages. I taught design classes at the community college. Every meaningful thing I did had slowly been replaced with cocktail parties, quiet dinners beside Elliot at Morgan family functions, and lonely nights in the kitchen while he traveled for work without asking if I wanted to come. I realized I'd become a hollowed out version of myself, and somehow I'd convinced myself that was called growing up. The barbecue was my breaking point. I wasn't surprised when Melissa said what she said. What chilled me was Elliot's laugh. Not a slip, it was a nod, a she's got a point kind of laugh. That was when I knew I'd lost the one thing that mattered most: respect. Not theirs, his. The next morning on the bus, I opened my phone. 4 messages. 1 from Elliot asking where I was, 3 from Lydia, 1 short question, 1 question mark emoji, and 1 reminding me she'd already booked the flight for Napa Valley next weekend. Not 1 message asking if I was okay. Not 1 asking why I left. Just surprised that my absence disrupted their plans. I smiled faintly. Turns out Melissa was right. I disappeared, and no one even stopped to ask why. Just that it was inconvenient. But strangely, at that moment, I felt lighter than ever. No more clinging, no more proving, no more pleading. I didn't need their approval anymore. I just needed mine. I looked out the window. Sunlight flickered through the trees, bright and gentle. On my lap was a fresh notebook. I was ready to start writing everything again. In my own handwriting, I arrived in Denver on a gray morning in early September, carrying a small, rolling suitcase, 3 boxes shipped ahead, and a short message to my sister. I'm here. I'm okay. Can I borrow your sofa for a few weeks? Tessa didn't ask questions. She just replied, there's a spare bed and it's sunny here. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old red brick building, but it felt strangely warm. The window overlooked an indie bookstore across the street, and in the mornings you could hear the soft hum of streetcars from downtown. On my first day in Denver, I just sat quietly in an armchair by the window, sipping a hot coffee made by Tessa, thinking about nothing. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to do nothing, to stop striving, to stop proving, just breathe. 3 days later, I rented a small studio in Capitol Hill. 1 bedroom, a little kitchen, dark wood floors, and an exposed brick wall in the living room. The windows stuck and the shower needed fixing, but I loved it instantly. It wasn't fancy, not modern minimalist, not like the house I'd shared with Elliot in Portland, but it was mine. I opened a new bank account at a local branch and transferred the remaining savings from our joint account, what the law allowed. I canceled the Morgan's family credit card, called to end every subscription under Elliot's name. Cutting each small tie felt lighter than shedding a suitcase. I uploaded my profile to 3 freelancer platforms, rebuilt my portfolio, carefully removing any project connected to the Morgan network. I rewrote my bio. I specialize in Indigenous brand design and emotional storytelling for businesses that want to tell their truth. It sounded poetic, but it was what I always believed, before I drowned in cocktail meetings and projects needing Richard Morgan's nod of approval. A week later, I walked into Maple and Gold Cafe looking for Wi-Fi and a cappuccino. But I found something more. The cafe was small, with a low ceiling, warm golden light, and the smell of fresh pastries wafting in from the back. One west wall was hand-painted in acrylic, showing a maple tree mid-fall, leaves scattered like broken memories. I stared at it, unblinking. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was right. The kind of right that stirs up the person you used to be. The woman behind the counter caught my gaze. Her gray-streaked hair was tied in a high bun, sun-worn skin, sharp eyes. "You want to ask about the painting, don't you?" she said first, voice husky but gentle. I nodded. "Who painted it?" "A kid, last year. Art student. Terrible with money. I let them trade pastry debt for the wall." She smirked. "I'm Margot, owner. And you?" "Josephine. I'm a designer, or trying to be, again." Margot gave me a slow scan, like she was reading a barcode. You free the next 3 days?" 3 days later, I started working at Maple and Gold. Not as a barista, but to redesign the menu, the outdoor signage, and the packaging for a new line of handmade cookies Margot had just launched. I don't want anything that looks like Starbucks, you get me? She said firmly. I want something that makes people think of their grandma's kitchen, not an office downtown. Then I'll do it by hand. No pre-made fonts. Good. Margot raised an eyebrow. Don't disappoint me. Margot wasn't warm. She didn't give praise easily, didn't ask about my past. But every time I handed her a draft, she studied it closely, pointed out proportion flaws, and said, "This isn't bad. Now make 2 more versions. Don't be afraid of color." Little by little, I learned to trust my hands again. I started sketching, not for clients, but for myself. The lines weren't perfect, but they had soul. Margot looked at one piece and nodded. Now that looks like your line work, not someone else's label stuck on you. A month later, I had 3 new clients, thanks to Margot's referrals: an indie bookstore, a recycled crafts collective, a nonprofit teaching job skills to single moms. I no longer waited for someone else's nod. I didn't need their stamp to prove I was enough. That evening, I walked home under a gentle Denver drizzle. The rain wasn't cold, just enough to make me tilt my head back and take a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt clear, no longer blurred by anyone else. 1 year after I left Portland, I walked into the Grand Aurora Hotel lobby in Denver, wearing a lanyard with the Carlington Foods logo, America's 6th largest food corporation. Below the logo was my name, Josephine Reed, lead brand designer, Maple Studio. Today was the opening of the National Consumer Goods Expo, where Carlington would unveil a new brand identity for its premium organic product line. I was responsible for all the design, packaging, point-of-sale branding, and the overall voice of the campaign. And the twist? This project fell under the consumer branch of Sterling & Co., the company founded by my former father-in-law, Howard Morgan. I found out about the connection later than I should have. When Carlington signed the contract with our studio, there was no mention of Sterling. I only realized it when the gala invite arrived with Sterling & Co., hospitality partner, printed in bold. At first I hesitated, but then I remembered Margot's words. If you're still avoiding them, it means they still hold the keys to a room you already walked out of. Go back and lock it yourself. So I went. Today, I didn't bring anyone for backup. I brought myself. Short, dark brown hair, a fitted ash gray dress, and black shoes that made no sound but carried every step firmly. Before I even entered the main hall, I heard a familiar voice, Howard's booming laugh. I spotted them near the wine bar. Melissa, of course, glowing in red, her arm looped through Elliot's. Still my husband on paper, though we'd lived apart for a year. His mother, Lydia, leaned in to whisper something to someone, her navy dress eerily reminiscent of the night I last had dinner with them. I didn't dodge. I walked straight into the conference hall, to the check-in table, and signed my name. "Welcome, Miss Reed. The folks at Sterling are really looking forward to meeting the woman behind this brilliant design," the staffer said, smiling. I simply nodded. 30 minutes later, I was speaking with a Walmart rep about display concepts when a hand tapped my shoulder. I turned. "Howard." "Josephine." "Mr. Morgan." He smiled, a little slower than usual. "Didn't expect it to be you, but the design definitely has a signature look." "Thank you. Very proud of this project." "Who are you working with these days?" "Maple Studio. I co-founded it with a partner here in Denver." Howard paused. "No longer freelancing?" "No, I rebuilt from scratch. And this time, I get to name the thing." He nodded. Said nothing more, but something flickered in his eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe discomfort. I didn't care. The second to approach was Lydia. She appeared beside me at the drink station, as if by chance. Josephine. I heard you live in Denver now." "Yes, I've settled here." "Elliot hasn't said much. He just said you two were taking some time." I smiled slightly. Maybe he's not ready to say we're over. She looked at me longer than I expected. "Back then, I thought, you weren't right for the Morgans, but seeing you now, I must admit, I didn't see the whole picture. It doesn't matter anymore. Being right for myself is enough. She didn't reply, but she nodded, then stepped away, as if unsure how to speak to someone she once pushed out of their dinner table. When I returned to the stage area to prepare for my presentation, Elliot was already there, one hand holding a glass, the other in his pocket, somehow looking smaller than before. "You've changed a lot." "You haven't," I said, voice light. "I read that feature about you in the Creative Edge. Your studio's getting big." I said nothing. He exhaled. "I know I wasn't there when you needed me, and I regret it now." "Elliot, you don't have to regret anything. The mistake was forcing me into a life where I always had to shrink myself." He nodded. No rebuttal this time. "Can I buy you coffee after the launch?" I looked at him. No anger, no longing, just calm. If it's a conversation between two people who once shared a path, then yes. When I stepped onto the stage and opened the first slide, I saw them. All four Morgans, seated in the second row. No one said a word, but nothing needed to be said. I had once been invisible in their world. Now I was the center of my own. After the presentation, I stepped off stage with a strange feeling. Not relief, not pride, just clarity, as if I had stood in front of an old version of myself and said, "I came back," but not to ask permission. I was gathering my sketch drafts when Melissa walked over. She wore a sharply tailored gray suit, her heavy heels striking the floor like punctuation marks. "Your presentation exceeded expectations," she said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "I thought Maple Studio only did local artsy projects." I smiled, unmoved by her familiar rhythm. A studio's limits stop where a client's imagination begins. Luckily, Carlington has no shortage of that. Melissa paused. I could see something shift behind her eyes, something she couldn't quite control. "Did you take the project because you knew Sterling was sponsoring it?" "No," I said plainly, "but even if I had known, I still would have done it. Not to prove anything, but because I'm good at what I do." She said nothing. For the first time, I saw Melissa without a comeback, just looking at me, really looking, like she was trying to understand how the woman she once saw as replaceable had become this version. "I know. I was harsh back then," she said after a pause. "But so was everyone. We were raised in a system where silence or backstabbing were accepted ways to keep order." "You weren't the only one," I said evenly. "But you need to understand, pain doesn't get canceled out by explanations. It only ends when the person causing it learns to stop." Melissa nodded. Her eyes softened. "I've been in therapy. My doctor says I have a pattern of rehearsing control in relationships. I didn't think I was that type until I saw you walk away, without warning. I spent a week realizing you didn't leave out of anger. You just didn't want to be pulled back in." I said nothing more, because sometimes the best apologies are the ones that ripen quietly in the person saying them. We parted with a simple nod, not warm, but enough to close an old chapter. As I walked toward the exhibition hall, I saw Elliot leaning against a balcony, staring at his phone, but clearly unfocused. When he noticed me, he squared his shoulders like it took all his courage just to speak. "Would you sit with me for a few minutes?" I nodded. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to see if the Elliot of today finally understood why he lost the wife who walked beside him for 8 years. We sat on a bench near the hotel cafe. He ordered me a latte, just how I liked it. Still remembered even after a year apart. "I've been seeing a therapist for the last 6 months, he began. "Not because you left, because I realized I was hollow." I let him talk. "I used to think I was fair, rational, kind, but really I just lived in a system designed to shield me from any emotions I didn't want to take responsibility for. Do you remember the day you lost the baby?" I gripped my coffee cup. "I remember, and I remember doing nothing. I even felt secretly relieved my travel schedule wasn't disrupted." A cruel sentence, but the bravest confession I'd ever heard from Elliot. For the first time, I saw him not as part of the Morgan family, but as a man learning to face himself. I know it's too late, but if any part of you wants to try again, even just a little, I'm ready to change. I looked him in the eyes. Elliot, I believe you can change, but that doesn't mean we're still right for each other. You don't love me anymore? I still do, but it's the love of someone who used to love you. Now, I love myself more. He lowered his head, nodded, then exhaled like he was finally letting go of something he'd gripped for a year. You forgive me? I don't need to, I just need to be me. We said goodbye with a short hug. No old cologne, no empty promises. Just a quiet acknowledgement we'd reached the end. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. I left the hotel just as the sun dipped behind the skyline. The Denver breeze carried a hint of early autumn chill, but my heart was warm. I used to chase recognition. Now I recognize myself, and that is enough. 2 weeks after the Carlington conference, I received an email titled, Design Quotation Request, Sterling & Co. Requests a direct meeting. The sender was Melissa Morgan, now the new creative director at Sterling. No veiled words, no nod to the past, just business. A professional invitation. A meeting to exchange ideas for an upcoming media campaign. I read it over and over, smiling. Not out of satisfaction, but because I had finally stepped out of the gray zone I'd once been trapped in, between the need to be accepted and the fear of being rejected. I replied briefly, Thank you, Melissa. My schedule's full until mid-month, but I can arrange a Zoom call after the 16th. Please send over the detailed brief in advance. 3 days later, during a virtual meeting, I presented the initial concept to Sterling. When I finished, Melissa paused for a moment, then said, No sarcasm, no sidestepping. This is the most professional proposal we've received all year. Thank you. I responded without hesitation. I'll only take this project if all design rights are protected and my studio's name appears publicly in all media materials. I won't stay behind the curtain anymore. Melissa nodded. You deserve that. I'll sign off on every term you request. For the first time, my former sister-in-law acknowledged my skills, not with flattery, but with contracts, clear terms, and boundaries respected. A week later, at a networking event in Denver, I ran into Mrs. Lydia, my ex-mother-in-law, there with a partner from the cosmetics industry. She recognized me the moment I stepped past the cocktail bar. Josephine. I turned. It was still her signature closed-lipped smile, but this time without the critical eyes. I just heard about the Sterling project. Melissa is very impressed. So am I. I simply nodded. Thank you. I used to think you didn't have what it takes to live in our world, but maybe I was wrong about that world and about you. For the first time, Lydia dropped the mask. She stood straight, didn't search for a graceful exit, didn't perform superiority. You weren't the only one mistaken, I replied gently, but I don't need an apology anymore. I'm at peace with what I know, and I know I belong here. Lydia nodded, then stepped away. No drama. Just the right ending between two women who once saw each other as outsiders. A few weeks later, I signed the contract to buy a small house in Edgewater, a lakeside neighborhood on Denver's west side where the sunset pours over the water like it was designed for someone learning how to begin again. A single-story wood home, pitched roof, white walls, big windows facing the garden. I didn't choose it for its style, but because it felt like me. Solid, simple, with no need to show off. I paid for it entirely with money I earned. No loans, no co-signers, just work, persistence, and the right choices I finally gave myself permission to make. On move-in day, Margot, the owner of Maple and Gold, brought over a loaf of rosemary toast and a jar of hand-roasted coffee. You built this whole network with your own hands, Josephine. This house is just physical proof of that. I hugged her, then looked out the window. Outside, the wooden fence still needed painting, and the stone path was missing a few pieces, but I didn't mind. All I felt was peace, the kind I hadn't known in nearly a decade. I hung my first piece of wall art, a personal design never released, a woman walking out of shadow, holding a glowing key. Beneath it, the words, "You don't need a seat at their table when you've built your own." A year ago, I left with just a suitcase and fingers stiff from holding on too tightly for too long. Now I have a home, a career, a community, and most importantly, I have myself. Whole. Without needing anyone's permission to exist. I didn't disappear. I just stopped living in someone else's story. And this time, I'm the one holding the pen. Josephine's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing isn't staying to be accepted. It's walking away to define your own worth. In real life, many people are learning to leave relationships that shrink them, even if they're called family. Not everyone deserves a place in your life, especially if the price is losing yourself. Like Josephine, you don't need to be seen by others. Just don't lose sight of who you are. Have you ever faced something similar to Josephine's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more honest, deeply moving stories about family and life. My name is Kennedy, and I'm 36 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've lived in the shadow of my older sister, Alexandra, who's 4 years older and never missed a chance to turn my life into a competition I never signed up for. Even in elementary school, Alexandra was praised as sharp and the natural heir of the family, while I was labeled reserved, a polite way of saying overlooked. At home, she always got the bigger slice of cake from mom, the TV remote from dad, and was the only one allowed to lock her bedroom door. Every decision revolved around her preferences. I used to think things would change when we got older. They didn't. Alexandra's manipulation just became more sophisticated with age. In high school, I had my first boyfriend, Ben. He was the first to take me to the movies, the first to hold my hand in the schoolyard. A week after Alexandra found out, she suddenly began bumping into Ben at the library. Then it was helping him with math, then working on a group project together. 2 weeks later, they were officially dating, like I had never existed. When I cried, Mom just said, "Well, if you didn't hold on tight enough, someone else will." Couldn't understand how a sister, my own flesh and blood, could be so cruel. Then came my college graduation. Alexandra showed up, of course, but made sure to insert herself into every conversation to talk about her new position at a major finance firm in New York. When I received my honors, she leaned over to Mom and muttered, "Just a decent GPA, nothing special." I didn't react. I never did. After every incident, Alexandra would come to me with watery eyes and say, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that hurt you." She always had an excuse. "I was under stress. I didn't mean to. I just want the best for you." And like a fool, I forgave her. I always forgave her. I didn't want to lose my sister. I used to dream of weekend coffee dates, warm holiday hugs, and late-night phone calls like other sisters have. But the more hope I held on to, the more I got met with coldness, jealousy, and subtle sabotage. Then she met Max, now her husband, and I thought maybe finally her life had found its own path. He was kind, calm, and didn't seem swept up in her usual theatrics. I was genuinely happy for them. I even stood as her maid of honor at the wedding. I wrote her a heartfelt speech and never once brought up our painful past. I truly believed Alexandra had changed. For a while after that, our relationship was tolerable. Not close, but civil. I told myself, at least now she has a husband, she'll stop fixating on me. I was naive. Because once Alexandra saw me start to build a life of my own, a stable job, my own apartment, a circle of close friends, that old competition flared up again. But this time, it wasn't snide remarks or dismissive glances. This time it was something darker. Something that made me wonder, if even family could betray you like this, where do you draw the line to protect yourself? The invitation was printed on heavy silk paper, edged in gold foil with embossed silver letters, celebrating 10 years of Alexandra and Max, Saturday evening at Rosemont Hall. I nearly tossed it in the trash, but like every other time I went. Some part of me still clung to the impossible hope that maybe this time things would be different. Rosemont Hall was the kind of place meant for people who wanted everyone to know just how wealthy they were. High ceilings, French crystal chandeliers, and servers in tuxedos floating like ghosts beneath candlelight. I arrived on time, wearing a simple black dress I'd had to reserve 2 weeks in advance, because I knew Alexandra. She never missed a chance to critique every detail, from your hemline to your heel height. She greeted me on Max's arm, wearing a crimson silk gown that hugged her body, a result of extreme dieting and, I guessed, no fewer than 3 beauty treatments a month. "Oh, you made it," Alexandra said, her lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. "The dress looks comfortable. Macy's?" I ignored the jab. "Happy 10-year anniversary," I said, turning my attention to Max. "Thanks, Kennedy," Max said warmly. He was still the same, polite, patient, and maybe the only person who ever made me believe Alexandra had a shot at being someone better. But even Max looked different that night. Tired, I thought. Drained. After a brief greeting, Alexandra was swept away for photos with her old college friends. Max handed me a glass of white wine, leaning in with a quiet comment. "You and your sister. Some things never change, huh?" I gave a small laugh, though nothing felt funny. "You doing okay?" "Okay is a flexible term," he said, glancing around. "Want to take a quick walk?" "I need air." We stepped into the side corridor behind the ballroom, quieter, filled with the faint scent of lavender from potted plants lining the walls. Max sat on a marble bench, stretched his arms, and sighed. "She planned tonight for 3 months," he began. "Every detail had to be flawless. But what? We're not the people in our wedding photo anymore. She controls everything, even how I feel." I stayed silent. I wasn't sure what made him open up to me. Especially tonight, of all nights, what was supposed to be their celebration of love. "She doesn't trust anyone, Kennedy," Max said softly. "Not even me." "Have you tried therapy together?" 3 times. Every time, she charmed the therapist, then quit when they eventually suggested she might be part of the issue. He let out a bitter laugh. "In Alexandra's world, anyone who doesn't obey is a traitor." I was about to reply when Alexandra appeared at the end of the corridor. She spotted us, Max sitting, me standing, a little too close under dim lighting, and froze. "Looks like you two are having quite the chat," she said, still smiling, but her eyes were sharp. "We're just talking," I answered evenly. "Of course. Kennedy always has great timing." Max stood up and interjected, "We just needed a break from the noise. You know how I hate crowds." "But you don't mind one-on-one time with my sister?" Alexandra snapped, then didn't wait for an answer. "The guests are looking for you. Let's go." She pulled Max away, leaving me standing there with nothing but a lukewarm glass of wine and the growing weight in my chest. Back in the ballroom, I tried to blend in, but Alexandra's gaze burned from across the room like a slow, deliberate fire. I'd crossed an invisible line, even if I didn't know what it was yet. Dinner began. I was seated at table 12 with 3 of Max's work colleagues and a distant cousin couple. Alexandra didn't say a word, but the look she gave me when I poured my second glass of wine felt like a silent warning. And then I started to feel something. At that moment, I had no idea that tonight would change everything. That behind the red silk gown, behind the polished speeches and carefully posed smiles, a storm had already begun. One I was about to be dragged into. I stepped away from the table to fix my lipstick, not because I needed to, but because I needed to escape the suffocating weight pressing in on me. Alexandra's 10-year anniversary party was orchestrated down to the last detail, but the one thing she didn't plan for was me. Or the way Max had said, "She's not the woman I once loved." The upstairs restroom was eerily quiet. I took a deep breath, washed my hands, tried to steady myself. But as I stepped back toward the ballroom, I froze. From a distance, I saw Alexandra standing by my table. Her back was to me, but the large wall mirror reflected her movements perfectly. From her purse, she pulled out a small object, twisted the top, and quickly emptied something into my champagne glass. The motion was smooth, practiced, as if she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I stood paralyzed, my blood roaring in my ears, skin gone cold. When she stepped back, her eyes met my reflection in the mirror. But Alexandra didn't see me. She turned, grabbed another glass, and slipped back into the crowd with her usual artificial smile. I walked calmly to the table, sat down as if nothing had happened. The champagne glass was refilled, sitting next to a chocolate-dipped strawberry. On the napkin, a message in gold ink read, "To the best little sister, A." I lifted the glass, tilted it under the light, a faint, odd fizz, dusty specks along the rim, nearly invisible unless you looked closely. I didn't drink. I also didn't leave. That would prove nothing, and I needed to know exactly what Alexandra had planned for me. I went looking for Max. He was near the dessert table, chatting with an old friend. I approached with a calm smile. "We haven't properly toasted yet," I said. You're right, but I think I've had enough already." "What about champagne?" I held up the glass, giving him no time to reconsider. "Just a sip for 10 years. He hesitated, then shrugged. "All right, but you first." I laughed softly. "That's outdated. You go first." Smoothly, I swapped his old wine glass with the champagne. The switch was seamless, even Max didn't notice. We clinked glasses, I only touched mine to my lips. Max took a full sip. I avoided looking across the room, but I could feel Alexandra's gaze piercing through the crowd. Her smile faltered the second she saw me put the glass down. Clear-eyed, steady. "How is it?" I asked Max. "Okay, a bit bitter," he said, frowning. "Doesn't taste like the usual." 15 minutes later, Max started acting strange. He laughed louder, rambled to strangers, and when the music started, he jumped onto the dance floor like it was a college frat party. I stood at the edge of the room, heart icy. Alexandra stared at him, grip tightening around her glass, face pale. When Max started stumbling, I heard her hiss a curse. She rushed onto the dance floor, grabbed his arm. He pulled away, laughing. "Let go, Alex. This is the most fun I've had all year." People turned. A group of women murmured, concerned. Alexandra grabbed his arm again, this time snapping under her breath. "What the hell are you doing?" Max replied, voice slurred. "Living like a normal person." Then he collapsed, right into the wedding cake table. The 3-tier cake toppled. Guests screamed. Staff ran in. Alexandra fell to her knees beside him, panicked. I calmly walked over and looked down at her. "Guess that toast didn't go down well," I said lightly. Alexandra looked up, eyes bloodshot, whispering through clenched teeth. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I said. "I just didn't drink what was meant for me." She understood instantly, and for the first time in her life, Alexandra had nothing to say. Max couldn't get up. He lay flat on the marble floor, surrounded by frosting and ruined cake, eyes wide open, lips moving with words no one could make out. The music stopped. A spoon dropped. A woman gasped, "Oh my God, is he having a stroke?" Alexandra nearly lost it. She knelt beside Max, shaking his shoulders while trying to smile at the growing circle of silent, retreating guests. "Sweetheart, it's just the alcohol, right? Get up, come on. They're watching." Max groaned, sat up shakily, face flushed, hair streaked with frosting. "Please, I need water. My head. It won't stop spinning," he stammered. A server rushed over with a glass. Max reached for it, but his hands trembled so violently the water spilled all over his shirt. I stood just a few feet away, never taking my eyes off Alexandra. She was panicking. Not the kind of panic about embarrassment, but the kind that came from fear of being found out. Her gaze flicked toward me, then darted away. She knew. And I knew she knew. A voice spoke from behind me. "We should call an ambulance," a relative from Max's side of the family. I nodded immediately. "Call now, this could be a drug reaction or something toxic in the drink." Alexandra snapped her head around, voice sharp. "Are you implying something, Kennedy?" "Not implying anything, but he didn't drink much, and that last glass, you poured it." The room went quiet. Guests exchanged glances. Some began edging toward the exits. "Don't accuse me like that," Alexandra screamed. "I just wanted this party to go smoothly." "By spiking your sister's drink?" I said, loud and clear. Gasps spread across the room. Max looked up, dazed, turning toward me. "Drugs? What drugs?" he slurred. "That's for the doctors to say," I replied, staring directly at Alexandra. "Unless you'd like to confess now." No one spoke as hotel staff pushed through the doors, announcing the ambulance had arrived. 2 paramedics in blue uniforms rushed in with a stretcher and medical gear. They surrounded Max, checking his blood pressure, pupils, and response time. "Did he consume anything unusual?" a nurse asked. I didn't hesitate. "Champagne, but I suspect it was laced with a sedative." The nurse looked up. "Do you know what kind?" I stayed silent. My eyes locked on Alexandra. Her face went pale. Hands trembling, she gripped the edge of a table to steady herself. 1 second. 2. Then she mumbled. "Ativan. Just 1 dose. I just wanted him to calm down." "You gave your husband benzodiazepine during a champagne toast?" one of the medics repeated, voice cold. "Not for him," I interrupted. "She meant to give it to me." Max croaked, "What?" The nurse responded urgently. "We need to transport him now. That combination can cause respiratory failure. He needs monitoring." Shock rippled through the crowd. No more smiles, no more raised glasses. Only glittering lights falling on a party floor, now frozen, while the truth spilled out, 1 drop at a time. Max was lifted onto the stretcher. As they prepared to wheel him out, he reached for my hand. "Thank you," he said, looking straight at me, "for seeing everything." I squeezed his hand gently, then stepped aside as the medics exited the hall. As the doors closed behind them, Alexandra turned to me. Her eyes were sunken, glassy with tears, but her voice was still sharp as steel. "You ruined my life." I looked straight at her. "No, Alexandra, you did that yourself. I just refused to go down with you." Then I walked away, and I didn't look back. Memorial Hospital was less than a 15-minute drive from Rosemont Hall, yet that night, the distance felt like a suspended sentence hanging over all of us. I arrived just minutes after the ambulance, alongside my parents, who had shown up just in time to see everything unravel. My mother stayed silent the entire walk down the corridor, and my father said only one thing. "We need to hear the truth from both sides." But his eyes betrayed any calm he tried to keep. Max was getting fluids through an IV, lying in the ER observation unit. He looked pale, but more alert than before. A nurse stopped us at the door, allowing only immediate family inside. Alexandra stepped forward first, but as soon as her hand touched the door, the nurse said quietly, "Placed her seat, Kennedy, alone." The hallway fell completely silent. Alexandra whipped around to glare at me, eyes furious, but no longer in control. I walked past her without a word. The door closed behind me like a curtain between past and present. Max looked up at me, his voice hoarse but clear. "Are you okay?" "I should be asking you that." "I never thought tonight would end this way," he said, pressing his lips together. "But maybe it should have ended a long time ago." We talked for about 10 minutes. I told him everything, from seeing Alexandra put something in the glass to switching it and watching what followed. Max stayed quiet through it all, only nodding now and then. "I'm not surprised," he finally said, "just disappointed I didn't walk away sooner." A few moments later, a nurse knocked on the door. "The police are here. They need statements." In a hospital consultation room, an officer jotted down notes as Max recalled everything, from how he felt after drinking the champagne to Alexandra's strange behavior during the party. When it came to the most crucial part, he turned to me. She didn't mean to drug me. The target was Kennedy. The officer turned my way. Can you confirm that? I saw her put something into my champagne glass through the mirror. Because I was suspicious, I switched it with Max. Do you know exactly what it was? Alexandra said it in front of at least 6 people. It was Ativan. He scribbled that down quickly, then looked at both of us. Even while we're still waiting for the blood work, if that's true and the victim was unaware, this could qualify as intentional poisoning. And Max inhaled deeply and shut his eyes for a few seconds. I don't want to press charges, I just want all of this to be over. The officer noted that and nodded. If no charges are filed by the victim, we may still open an investigation if there are signs of health risks or potential for repeat behavior. As he left, I saw Alexandra curled up on a bench down the hallway, fingers clenched so tight it looked painful. When my father approached and asked, "Is it true?" she didn't look up, only murmured, "I just wanted to make her lose control just a little so people could see she's not perfect." I stood frozen, staring. You were that jealous you risked someone's safety. Alexandra looked up, eyes bloodshot. You always made me feel like the extra in my own family. Even when you weren't trying. Mac stopped seeing me the same way. But you, just being in the room, he turned back into who he used to be. I could barely believe what I was hearing. You really thought I stole him? I never tried to ruin anything you had. But you've never stopped trying to ruin me. My father spoke low, voice cracking. This ends now. Alexandra didn't answer. But she didn't resist either, as my mother gently pulled her toward administration. She had to sign a release allowing the hospital to report the medication to the authorities. As for Max and me, we just looked at each other, drained, but lighter. I'm moving out next week, Max said later when I returned to his room, and I'll be hiring my own attorney. Are you sure? There's no other choice. This isn't a marriage anymore, it's a battlefield. I nodded. 1 week after that fateful night, my father called, his voice cold as steel, but laced with exhaustion. Sunday, 2 p.m., at the house. No exceptions. He wasn't joking. The last time he summoned the whole family like this was when Grandma died. This time felt just as heavy. But the one who died wasn't a family member. It was the trust between the ones still living. When I stepped into the childhood home in suburban Greenville, my mother was setting down a tray of tea. Alexandra was already there, curled up at the dining table. No makeup, no glamorous outfit, just an oversized gray t-shirt, jeans, and circles under her eyes that couldn't be hidden. Dad sat at the head of the table, fingers intertwined, eyes sharp with the weight of 3 decades as a psychology professor. I don't know where to begin, he said. But this can't be brushed aside like the small fractures of the past. No one said a word. My mother placed the teapot down and took the seat beside me. Alexandra, is there something you'd like to say to the family? My sister lifted her head and looked straight at me. Her voice was raspy, shaky, but clear. This week, my doctor diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, BPD. I kept a calm face, but inside, fragments of memory began snapping into place. Every irrational fight, every manipulation, every emotional flip, now forming a clearer picture. I've always felt like everyone would leave me, Alexandra continued. So I cling, I control, I sabotage, especially with Kennedy. I always believed she would take everything I had. I didn't react. No smirk, no nod, just listened. And Max, too. When he started confiding in her, laughing with her, I panicked. I felt replaced, like I was drowning. My mother reached out and took her hand. Alexandra pulled away, not harshly, but honestly. No need to comfort me, Mom. I'm not saying this to get forgiveness. It's just the first time I want to be honest, no excuses. Dad nodded slowly, then turned to me. What about you, Kennedy? I took a breath. I'm willing to attend family therapy, but on one condition. What condition? My mom asked, a note of concern in her voice. I need space, No texts at midnight, no surprise dinners, no casual invites. Every interaction has to be mutually agreed upon, not just because we're sisters we have to endure each other. I looked Alexandra in the eyes. I'm not going back to being the sister who always forgives. I don't want to live in defense mode anymore. If there's going to be healing, it starts with respecting boundaries. Alexandra stayed quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Fair, you have that right. This time I won't try to bend it anymore. My mom sighed, eyes glassy. We should have seen this sooner. What we thought was sibling rivalry was actually a silent cry for help. Dad stood and pulled a stack of printed papers from his pocket. These are appointments with a family therapist. Weekly sessions. Everyone shows up. We won't repeat our parents' mistakes, denial, silence, and the every family has problems excuse. I took the paper and folded it without a word. The meeting didn't end with tears or cinematic hugs. It ended in a strange, still quiet, as if we all understood this would be long, messy, but at least, for the first time, everyone was ready to truly begin. Just before I left, Alexandra stepped toward the door and paused. You don't have to answer now, but if someday you want to hear me say sorry again, sincerely, the right way, I'll still be here. I didn't reply, but for the first time, as I closed the door behind me, I didn't feel like I had to lock it. I just let it rest ajar. Because this time, I wanted to be the one who decides if and when it opens again. 6 months after the family meeting, I received a message from Alexandra. Can you give me an hour, just coffee, no pressure, no past talk if you're not ready? I read the message 4 times. No exclamation points, no hidden jabs, no begging. For the first time in my life, an invitation from my sister came with no strings, no manipulation. I said yes, but I picked the cafe. A quiet spot on the west side where I usually worked on weekends. Neutral ground. Familiar to me, not to her. Safe. Alexandra arrived right on time. Not early to assert control, not late to provoke. She wore a cream hoodie, hair tied back, face bare. No lipstick, no mascara, no armor. Hi, she said softly, sitting across from me. Hey, I replied, placing my phone on the table, a subtle boundary. We ordered drinks. I got my usual oolong tea. She asked for water. Just water. No sugar-free soy latte with 3 modifiers. Just a quiet, almost startling choice. Are you doing okay? She asked. I'm all right. She nodded. No probing. After a short silence, she spoke. I've been going to therapy 3 times a week, one-on-one with ABD specialist, 1 group, 1 session focused on conflict behavior. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. I've been doing the homework, journaling, tracking impulses and breaking them down later. At first, I thought it was a joke. I chuckled. I thought the same when I started. But then I realized I've lived my whole life on reflex. Couldn't tell what was real pain and what was imagined. And the moment I felt even a hint of threat, I struck first. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't asking for pity. She was just telling the truth, like someone describing a scar. My mother's voice echoed down the back stairs. What about Mac? Divorce is finalized, she said, looking down. We split everything. He doesn't want contact, and I respect that. I sat there. I thought I'd feel satisfied hearing that, but I didn't. It was just sad. Not for them, but because loss is still loss, no matter who it happens to. I moved out of the city, she said. Now I'm in Salem, Oregon, part-time work with a nonprofit for women after divorce, not as a director, just staff. I write outreach content, help with the summer campaign. I almost asked, you're really doing that, but instead, I asked, do you feel lighter? For the first time, Alexandra smiled, not forced, not smug, not broken. Yes, it's strange, but yes. We sat there for a while. No dramatic apology, no sweeping promises. Just 2 women, once called sisters, relearning what that word could mean. I don't expect forgiveness, she said, eyes steady. I just hope. One day, if it feels right to you, maybe we can build something new, not from blood, from understanding. I was quiet. Then I said slowly, maybe. But this time, boundaries stay. No crossing lines. Deal, she said right away. If I slip, you can call me out. Not to shame me, just to help me remember why I want to change. I nodded, something inside me softened. Not forgiveness, but maybe acceptance. When we parted, she didn't hug me, didn't ask to. She just said, "Thank you for coming." I watched her walk away. No swagger, no scanning the room for control. Just a woman, with a tangled past and a future still unwritten. 1 month after our reunion, I received a postcard from Alexandra. Not an email, not a text, a real postcard with a photo of the Seattle shoreline at dusk. On the back, just 12 words. I'm not running away. I'm starting over. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the familiar slant of her handwriting, less perfect now, no longer trying to impress. It felt like a sigh between two people who'd stopped needing to prove who was right. Alexandra had really moved. Mom said she rented a small apartment in Fremont near Gasworks Park. She's still working part-time for the women's support nonprofit. Recently, she even enrolled in an online counseling course to understand myself before trying to help others. I don't know where Alexandra's path will lead. I don't pretend her changes are permanent. But for the first time, I don't feel pulled by expectations or on alert. I'm simply an outsider, watching a family member with cautious but gentle eyes. And me? I'm still in Greenville, living in my 2-bedroom apartment near downtown. I'm not trying to be noble, nor am I forcing myself to forget everything that happened. I still wake up some nights remembering that moment when Alexandra slipped something into my wine, and that chill crawling up my spine. But I've also learned not to let that wound define me. After all, anger might protect you in a crisis, but it can't nourish you long term. I keep going to therapy. I'm learning to rewrite my boundaries, not out of fear this time, but out of clarity. I've been pruning my relationships, keeping only those who don't make me feel small in my own life. Max and I still check in, an occasional birthday text, a shared article about mental health. He's moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and opened a bookstore cafe. In the pictures he sends, he smiles more, his hair a bit longer, looking nothing like the man in a suit from that long-ago party. I'm happy for him. And for myself, for letting go of what couldn't be saved. Whenever someone asks me about Alexandra, I no longer say, my sister is a control freak. Now I say, my sister is trying to become someone new. I don't know how long that will last. Nothing is guaranteed. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Real change doesn't begin the moment you say, I'm sorry. It begins the moment you stop trying to prove you were never wrong. I haven't fully forgiven, maybe I never will, but I'm ready for the long road to healing. Mine and of those I once loved, once hurt for, once couldn't walk away from. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I passed by the cafe where we met. It was busy. I didn't go in. I just stood outside for a moment. I smiled. Not for anyone else, but because for the first time in my life, I felt light. And not because of someone else, because I chose to be. Someone once asked me, why doesn't Kennedy hate her sister after everything she did? This is what I told them. Because hatred is a chain that keeps two people bound forever. And I've learned how to pick the lock. Not everyone deserves to stay in your life. But some people, if they truly want to, will learn to walk back in through the front door instead of breaking in with guilt or tears. Alexandra knocked. I haven't fully opened the door, but at least I'm not building walls anymore. And sometimes that's the first step towards something different. Not perfect, not forgetful, but real enough to begin again. Even if all it says is, I'm still here, if you're ready. Kennedy's story is a powerful reminder that not every family wound can heal overnight, but honesty and clear boundaries are where real healing begins. In real life, many grow up in families marked by rivalry and pain, yet still believe forgiveness is automatic. The truth is, you have the right to protect yourself, to be respected, and to reconnect only when both sides are willing to do the work. Sometimes the biggest step isn't forgiveness, it's choosing not to be hurt anymore. What do you think of Kennedy's journey and her choices? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories about family and healing. My name is Madeline Carter, 35 years old, creative director at a media company in Seattle. On the morning of December 23rd, I left my small apartment with a large gift box and a freshly baked cherry pie, the kind my grandmother taught me to make when I was just a kid under 10. I drove nearly 900 miles, crossing 3 states to return to Rapid Falls, a small town in North Dakota I left almost 8 years ago, with a promise never to look back. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted to surprise my mom, Teresa, and my younger brother, Caleb, who's 6 years younger than me. I figured they'd be shocked. Maybe, after all these years of me being the only one to keep in touch, sending money regularly, checking on mom's health, paying off Caleb's student loans, and buying birthday gifts for both of them, maybe there'd be a small moment of genuine happiness when they saw me standing on the porch, arms full of Christmas. I'd miss many holidays with them because of work, but I never forgot to send money. This year, I wired an extra $900 at the beginning of December with a note for a special dinner and a little extra for Caleb to fix the car. My mom replied with a short thanks in a text, no emoji, no call. I told myself maybe she was tired. During the drive, I pictured her face when she opened the door, surprised and then bursting into tears, hugging me tight like she did that Christmas leave back in 2015. I imagined Caleb running out, grabbing the gift box from my arms and saying, "Did you really bring me that console, sis?" It took me almost 12 hours to drive through a snowstorm. The tires slipped more than once in Montana. I stopped at a local store in Bismarck to buy ingredients, selecting deep red cherries and premium cinnamon sticks for the pie. I also picked out a forest green wool scarf for Mom. The color she once said brightens my whole face. When I called to let her know I was close, she only said, "Yeah, we're getting dinner ready, no rush." Her voice was flat, not a single exclamation point. She didn't ask if I needed a break or if I'd eaten. When I said I'd brought gifts, she added, "There's nobody new here, don't worry." Still, I kept driving. I thought maybe she was just busy. I thought. Families can be a little distant, but deep down, there's always a bond. I thought I was still Teresa's daughter. And Caleb's sister. I reached town around 6 p.m. Snow was still falling lightly. Maple Street, leading to Mom's house, was lined with warm, golden Christmas lights, and I saw the driveway packed. There was a red SUV, a brand new Lexus, and even a sleek Mercedes I'd never seen before. I was surprised. Mom hadn't mentioned any big gathering. I checked my hair in the rearview mirror, reapplied a dark red lipstick, then carried the pie and the bag of gifts toward the 2-story house I grew up in. Christmas music floated out from the window. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon drifted in the cold air. I stepped onto the porch, hands slightly trembling from cold and nerves. I rang the doorbell. The door opened. My mom stood there. She wore a black velvet dress, a string of pearls, a glass of red wine in hand. Her eyes scanned me once, then turned cold. "Sorry, I think you have the wrong house." I froze. "Mom, it's me, Madeline." She didn't blink. "I think you're mistaken. No one by that name lives here." And then she shut the door. No explanation, no hug, no Merry Christmas. I remained on the snowy porch, holding the warm pie in my hands. My heart clenched like someone had grabbed it and squeezed. I don't remember how I made it back to my car. I just remember the snow getting heavier, the icy wind smearing the mascara I had carefully applied that morning. The cherry pie I carried all those miles now sat abandoned on the porch, still steaming through its golden crust. I placed the gift bag in the back seat and sat motionless behind the wheel. The porch light kept blinking, laughter from inside spilled into the night, but I, the only daughter of Teresa, was left outside the door like a stranger. I grew up in Rapid Falls. That house used to be where I belonged once. My parents divorced when I turned 16. At the time, I was still in high school, and Caleb had just started 5th grade. The split wasn't dramatic. No legal battles, no shouting, but the cold that followed never lifted. My father, Bruce, moved to Arizona with a woman named Darlene, whom he called his true soulmate. He paid child support on time, but called less and less. Within 3 years, he vanished completely from my life. But Caleb kept getting birthday gifts from Dad and Darlene. I once resented him, but over time I realized Mom held the real keys to our lives. Teresa worked as head nurse at the city hospital. Her shifts ran from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. She left with a cold lunch and came home with dark circles under her eyes. I learned to cook from YouTube to make dinners for us and Caleb. I tutored him in math, worked weekends at a bookstore to help cover school costs. One time, she collapsed in the living room from exhaustion. I skipped 2 weeks of school to care for her. I didn't complain. I believed. That's what a good daughter does. And after finishing my degree in communications, I didn't leave immediately. I worked for a small marketing firm in Bismarck, just a 45-minute drive from home. Every Sunday night, I brought food home for Mom and Caleb. Sometimes I did her laundry and stayed up late preparing reports for Monday morning. Caleb had just started community college. I paid for his textbooks, gas, even bought him a new laptop when the old one accidentally fell into a lake. So I only moved out when a major firm in Seattle hired me with double the pay. I remember the day I told Mom in the living room. She looked up from the utility bill and said, "Yeah, guess it's time you lived for yourself." Caleb, then 25, still living at home, hugged me and said, "You gotta crush it out there, sis. Prove this family's not all failure." I thought he meant it. 3 months later, Mom called at midnight. "The heater's broken. They quoted $3,500. I don't have it." I wired the money first thing in the morning. 2 months after that, Caleb called. "Hey, I landed an interview at the shop, but my car's dying. I can't even get there unless it's fixed." I sent $4,200 for the transmission and new tires. After that, I set up regular transfers. $850 monthly to Mom, $500 to Caleb. Sometimes I wondered, they're working. Why can't they manage? But then I felt guilty. I was earning good money. They were my family. Helping was the right thing to do. I only paused when I started noticing odd changes. Mom had a new sofa set. The kitchen was upgraded, European-style finishes. Caleb posted pictures of a brand new pickup. GPS installed. When I asked, they laughed. "Got a huge sale. Besides, gotta treat yourself sometimes, right?" I convinced myself everything was fine. I was just being sensitive. But when phone calls were cut short, texts went unanswered, and all communications circled back to "can you send more?" I felt something chill in my spine. That chill seeped into every call I made, every bill I paid for them, every flight I booked for Mom that she never used. It was the feeling of being used, but lacking proof to confront it. I had moved to Seattle to live my own life, but my heart was still trapped in Rapid Falls, in the invoices, in my bank statements, in every time I whispered to myself, if I don't help them, who will? I believed love would be returned. I thought I was a good daughter. Until that night, when my own mother looked me in the eyes and said, "Sorry, I think you have the wrong house." I started feeling the distance when our calls became less frequent. At first, Mom would cancel because she was too tired after the night shift. Then Caleb would promise to call back, but never did. Gradually, I became the only one initiating contact. One day, I returned Caleb's missed call during my lunch break. He answered flatly. "Why'd you call back? I just wanted to ask if you could send this month's money early. My card's about to be charged." I paused, keeping my voice steady. Sure. By the way, did you get the package I sent last week? I included your favorite snacks and a new hoodie. Probably. Haven't opened it, been busy. And that card game you sent months ago? Mom gave it to her friend's kid. I don't really play. I gave a dry laugh. That game had to be ordered from Australia. After Caleb texted, "Man, I wish I had that set," I thought I was doing something meaningful. To them, it was just stuff. Last winter, I came down with severe pneumonia. I was hospitalized for 5 days. The doctor told me to take at least 2 weeks off. I called Mom, still wheezing through the oxygen tube. After a brief silence, she asked, "So you're not coming home for Christmas?" "I can't. I'm in the hospital." That's too bad. Caleb was hoping you'd get NBA tickets this year. And those new headphones. I told him not to expect anything, but he still hoped. Lying in a hospital bed, I got no "how are you feeling?" No "I'll come visit," or even "I'll call tomorrow." Just disappointment over gifts. Still, that year, I sent money, I ordered the presents, I handwrote cheerful holiday cards like everything was fine. I told myself, maybe they're just stressed, tired, preoccupied. Each month, the transfers continued. $850 to Mom, $500 to Caleb. It started to feel like I was paying them to keep my place in the family. I began calling those payments my daughter tax. I texted Mom weekly. Most messages were seen. When she did reply, it was often something random. "Mrs. Nancy from the old neighborhood sold her house," or "the church is redoing its roof." Never a single question about me. Once, I shared that I was appointed project lead for a major international campaign. The CEO even sent a printed commendation. I sent Mom a photo. No response. 3 days later, Caleb texted, "Hey sis, I broke my phone. Can you help me get a new iPhone?" No congratulations. No, I'm proud of you. Everything they said to me translated into dollar signs. I, at 35, working from morning to night, cooking alone, sleeping alone, living far from home, kept wiring money back like some guilty child making penance for a sin I never committed. One night after work, I walked through the drizzle in Seattle. I stopped by a stone wall covered in handwritten love notes. Amid the clutter, one scribbled line stood out. "No one really forgets you, they just remember you when they need something." I stood in the rain a long time. Many nights I'd look at my bank account and ask, if I stop, will I lose them? But the real question was, if they only stayed because of the money, did I ever really have them? I'm not someone who lives by suspicion. I've always made excuses for Mom and Caleb. I've told friends they're just not expressive or they're too busy to call. I hid the emotional cuts behind layers of success and strength. But at some point, even someone who keeps looking for the light has to admit some rooms just don't have windows. The white painted wooden door shut in my face with a dry click, more brutal than any rejection in words. I stood there on the snow-covered steps, holding a slightly warm cherry pie, gift bag weighing heavy on my other arm. No one opened the door again. No one called my name. Just the music from the speakers inside kept playing. Warm, meaningless, cruel. I stepped back, trying to stay upright in my soaked boots. For a second, I still hoped it was a misunderstanding, that my mother, Teresa, would open the door again, force a smile and say, "Oh, it's you! Come in, sweetie, it's cold out there." But the lights behind the curtains just blinked rhythmically. No one came out. No mishap explained that cold stare or the words, "Sorry, you've got the wrong house." I was there for less than a minute, but it felt like I'd turned to stone in the Dakota snow. As I turned to leave, the door opened again. A tall man appeared. Slicked back hair, charcoal suit, red tie. For a second, I didn't recognize him. Caleb. He looked at me, and in a flash, his eyes widened in surprise, but it quickly shifted into something I couldn't name. Shame? Fear? Or just that awkward look you give an outdated item you didn't expect to see again? "Mom, who is that?" Caleb asked, voice slightly high, trying to stay composed. I spoke up. It's me, Madeline, your sister. He looked at me, didn't move forward or step back. One hand rested lightly on the door frame, an invisible barrier. Oh, right, I thought you weren't coming. You thought? I steadied my voice. You knew I was coming. I called, I texted, I sent gifts. You asked for more money 3 weeks ago, Caleb. He glanced behind him, where golden lights flickered in the living room. Then back at me, voice lowering. Not now, we've got guests. Mom's a little on edge, you know how it is. Don't make a scene, it's Christmas. I'm making a scene? I let out a short, bitter laugh as anger rose in my chest. I drove over 500 miles through a snowstorm, brought pie and gifts for you and Mom, and I'm the one causing trouble? Caleb looked around, clearly worried someone might overhear. Fine. We'll talk later. Just go. Mom doesn't want to see you right now. That was the moment I let go. The cherry pie dropped into the snow, splitting in half. The last bit of warmth from its crust steamed briefly, then vanished into the freezing air. I let the gift bag fall beside it. One box popped open, revealing the emerald green cashmere scarf I'd picked out with such care. Caleb didn't bend down, he just stood there. In the flickering lights behind him, Caleb was now the man of that house, a house that no longer had space for me. You should be ashamed of yourself, Caleb, I whispered. But maybe you don't even remember what that feels like. I turned away, no one stopped me. As I stepped off the porch, the door shut again. I heard laughter inside, the clink of glasses. Then a familiar voice cut through the barely closed door. Thought it was someone else, just stood out there, like some uninvited stray. My mother. No doubt about it, her voice, her tone, her words, as if I was a nuisance, an accident, a stain she was trying to hide from her perfect party. Back in the car, my fingers were so cold I couldn't turn the key. In the rearview mirror, I saw myself. Hair messy, cheeks flushed with cold and grief, mascara smeared like soot. A woman who brought kindness and tradition home, only to be tossed out like trash. That Christmas I received the most valuable gift, the truth. Not pretty, but necessary. I sat in the car for nearly 30 minutes, unable to leave. My hands gripped the steering wheel, trembling. Though I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the shock, my breath fogged up the windshield in long streaks. Then my phone rang. Caleb's name lit up the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking up. Madeline, are you still out there? His voice was hushed, like he didn't want anyone to hear. I answered, flatly. In the car. Look, don't be mad at Mom, okay? She's just stressed. Tonight's a big deal. There are guests from Palm Springs, even Mr. Jameson, her spa investor. Everything had to be perfect. I said nothing. I didn't think you were actually coming. Mom said you canceled, so we figured, if I'd known, I would've what? Let me in so I didn't stand outside like a beggar? Silence. No excuses. No real apology, just a repeated line. Let's meet tomorrow, for coffee. We'll talk properly. I didn't bother answering. Just as I was about to hang up, he added, Send me your hotel address. I'll pick you up. Then the call ended, or so I thought. I set the phone down on the passenger seat, leaned back, and tried to steady my breath. But not even 2 minutes later, from the still-lit phone, I heard voices. Clear and unmistakable. She really thinks we're meeting for coffee tomorrow? Caleb's voice. So, are you going? That was my mother, Teresa, her voice sharp, tired, annoyed. Of course not. Why would I? So she can beg for more money? I told her to wait. Coffee's cold and she can find her own ride. Laughter followed. I grabbed the phone, stared at the screen. The call was still connected. Caleb hadn't hung up. She still thinks she's part of this family, my mother scoffed. That girl's lived alone too long, made up her own story. Sends money, gifts like it matters. We just accept it to be polite. Well, saves us the trouble, Caleb snorted. If she stops sending it, even better. I couldn't catch every word after that. Glasses clinking, music swelling, someone talking about the new spa in Boulder Creek and how sharp Caleb looked tonight. I sat frozen. Each word they said sliced into me. All those years I'd sent money for Mom's house repairs. Turns out it funded her luxury spa. All the car payments I made for Caleb so he could look fancy for his friends. Every call, every message, every thoughtful gift, now labeled a burden. My hand shook as I scrolled back to the call. Still active. I let it run. Not because I wanted to hear more, but because I needed to record it. Some part of me still couldn't believe this was real. That they, the people I once gave my whole youth to care for, were now calling me a walking ATM. That poor thing who always needs attention. The lonely older sister no one really cares about. She really thinks she belongs, sends a few bucks, and thinks she's earned a seat at the table? Caleb's laugh cut through me. "A few bucks?" I whispered as tears slid down my face. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me, painfully precise. $850 per month for Mom, 4 years straight. $500 monthly for Caleb. $3,200 for emergency brake repair. $2,500 for Caleb's friend with cancer. $1,000 for Mom's surprise birthday. Every bit of it was real, and I thought it was love. The call finally disconnected when my phone hit 1% battery. I didn't plug it in. I didn't hang up. I just sat there, alone in the dark, in the snow, with a truth colder than any rejection. They never loved me like family. They only loved what I gave. Here is your American English translation, following your rules for money, time, and natural phrasing for voice narration. I got back to the motel just before midnight. My hands were stiff, my lips cracked, from the cold and from too many things I couldn't put into words. The third-floor room smelled like old heater coils mixed with bleach, but to me in that moment, it felt like a tiny fortress. The only place no one could knock on the door and say, "You're not welcome here." I dropped my bag, pulled out my laptop, and powered it on. My hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't from the weather. It was something sharper. Not pain, clarity. I opened my bank account. The familiar interface showed hundreds of transactions, each month like clockwork. I started taking screenshots, every line, every entry, each labeled Mom, Caleb, house bills, emergency, hospital, birthday, all documented, nothing skipped. It took over an hour to gather what I needed. Then I opened the credit card app. Dozens of purchases under authorized user Teresa Carter. One was nearly $4,700 for spa equipment. Note, non-refundable steam therapy unit. I froze every card, no warning. The one Mom was using for medications, permanently canceled. The one Caleb had access to since last year, gone from the system. My move to the recurring transfers tab. $850 a month to Mom, $500 a month to Caleb. I hit cancel on each, confirmed again. With every click, I felt a chain fall off my neck. Then I opened a new email to Teresa Carter at Carmel, C-A-R-E-S. Subject, termination of financial support, effective immediately. I typed every word calmly. No insults, no drama, just facts. Direct, final. I have terminated all financial support in any form. All secondary credit cards have been locked. Monthly transfers have been canceled. The total I've contributed over the past 4 years is $76,540, not including gifts, supplies, or medical/home renovation costs. All records have been archived for legal purposes if necessary. Please do not contact me for financial assistance again. Madeline Carter. I read it 3 times. No typos, no extra emotion, no questions left. I hit send. 5 minutes later, the phone lit up. Text from Caleb. "What the hell are you doing? I can't pump gas. Card declined." Text from Mom. Madeline. "Oops, Madeline, call me now." A minute later, "I'm in the middle of hosting. Are you trying to humiliate me?" Another text from Caleb. No punctuation, no break. "Are you crazy? Who do you think you are, cutting everything off like that? Rent's due, do you even care?" I silenced the phone, turned it face down, and stared out the window. Outside, snow was falling, quietly, layer by layer, covering rooftops, streets, and the broken bond I had just buried. An hour later, I checked my phone. Nearly 30 missed calls, texts longer than a bank statement, an email from Mom at 2:12 a.m. Madeline, you're clearly in emotional distress. What you've done is impulsive and harmful. Families don't cut each other off over money. If you don't restore the accounts within 48 hours, I'll be seeking legal counsel. Second email from Caleb. Cutting financial support right before Christmas is financial abuse. You won't get away with this. I'm speaking to Mom's attorney. I just laughed. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't even realize that the things they said that night, the ones they thought I didn't hear, exposed everything about what family really meant in that house. The next morning, I drove away from Rapid Falls. No goodbyes. On the dashboard, I played an old playlist, one that used to welcome me home. The first track, Coming Home. But this time I knew I had no home to return to. And somehow, I felt freer than I ever had. Here is your English translation in natural American style with spoken-friendly formatting and unit handling as requested. I returned to Seattle on the morning of December 25th. The city was covered in fog, eerily quiet. On the drive back to my small apartment, I didn't play music or make any calls, just let the sound of tires rolling across the icy road soothe the quiet shatter inside me like a lullaby. Nothing had changed in the sixth-floor apartment. The little fake Christmas tree still sat in the corner, and the box of holiday cookies someone gave me was still on the kitchen counter. But I was no longer the same woman who had walked out of this place 3 days earlier. I spent the next 3 days sleeping. No check-ins with work, no email. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and deleted all contact info for Mom and Caleb. Messages kept coming in, but I didn't read them. I didn't need to know anything else. On the 4th day, I scheduled an online therapy session with Dr. Helen Morse, a therapist a colleague had recommended last fall. Back then, I told myself I didn't need help. Now, I knew better. In that first session, I could only say one thing. My family doesn't need me. They just need my wallet. Dr. Morse nodded gently. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix me. She listened like I was an unfinished piece of music, not a problem to be solved. By the 3rd session, the full picture became clear. I'd been trapped in a system of financial abuse disguised as duty. Caleb and my mom manipulated me with guilt, strategic silence, and unspoken expectations, turning me into an unconditional income source. Dr. Morse said something that left me speechless the rest of the session. Numbers don't lie, Madeline, but it's your emotions that have been exploited the most. It wasn't heartbreak. It was awakening. Weeks later, I started going out on weekends, walking around Capitol Hill, browsing used bookstores and cafes with scratched wooden chairs and walls full of scribbled notes from strangers. I learned to sit alone without feeling lonely. I learned to cook dinner just for myself and not feel guilty for not sharing with someone. One Saturday afternoon, while taking down recycling, I met June Mathers, my downstairs neighbor. Nearly 70, warm brown skin, gray hair in a neat bun, always carrying a yarn basket. "You're the girl who leaves the building at 6:45 every morning, right?" she asked, squinting through her glasses. I laughed, surprised she'd noticed. "Exactly 6:45, unless it's pouring," I said. We started talking. June lived alone since her husband passed 5 years ago. Her kids lived far away. Occasional calls, but rarely visits. She didn't complain. She spoke like reading aloud an old journal entry. She taught me how to knit. I taught her how to video call her grandkids. Every Sunday, I had dinner at her place. Her stew was better than anything my mom ever cooked. We didn't need many words, just presence. She said, "A real family isn't who you share blood with. It's who never turns love into a transaction." Gradually, I opened up to others in the building, the elderly gay couple from the third floor, the biology student who always carried cat treats, the widower from 4 who gave me apples from the garden behind his truck. We called ourselves the chosen family. Work picked up too. When I returned, my boss Amanda stared at me for a moment, then said, "I don't know what you did during the holidays, but your eyes, they're different, sharper, fuller." I just smiled. A few months later, I was assigned to lead a collaborative project with a major brand. I bought a new blazer. Not to impress anyone, but to remind myself, I'm living this life for me now, not to be useful to someone else. I opened a new savings account called Freedom Fund. Each month, I deposit the exact amount I use to send to Mom and Caleb, not for spending, but for investing in the only thing that's ever truly mine, myself. On Christmas Day, a year later, I sat beside June at the little dinner we'd prepared together. No big tree, no fancy tablecloth, no one demanding anything. But I had never felt more loved without having to pay for it. One April afternoon, I was standing outside an old bookstore near Pike Place, waiting for a coffee date, when I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure through the window. Tall, thin, wearing a gray coat with frayed shoulders, he stopped at the postcard stand, holding one with a picture of the Space Needle in the snow, tilting his head to read the fine print on the back. I almost didn't recognize him, but when he turned around, my eyes met a once familiar gaze. Caleb. He looked very different from the last time I saw him on Mom's front steps. Stubbled face, heavy eye bags, messy hair that used to be perfectly trimmed. Gone was the Caleb who drove a Mercedes, dressed in designer coats, and walked out of fancy parties. When our eyes met, I saw a flicker of panic cross his face, then vanish just as quickly. Caleb walked toward me, slipping the postcard into his pocket, wearing a forced smile. "Madeline, wow, you're still in Seattle?" I stood upright and gave a slight nod. "Still here, you?" "Moved back 3 months ago, working for a small logistics company. Not my dream job, but..." He shrugged. "It's something." I glanced down at his shoes. Worn heels, salt stains. There was no judgment in my mind, only an odd calm. "I see. Hope you're doing okay." He hesitated. "Do you have a few minutes? Maybe we could sit? I'd like to talk." I looked at my watch. In 10 minutes, I was meeting June at the nearby cafe. But what kept me from saying yes or no right away was Caleb's eyes. They didn't carry arrogance or avoidance anymore. There was, perhaps, a hint of regret, or at least an effort to show it. I pointed to a wooden bench on the sidewalk. "Here's fine. I don't have much time." Caleb nodded. We sat down like strangers sharing a park bench. "I know, you probably don't want to hear anything from me, but there are things I think I should say." I stayed silent. "What happened last year, there's no excuse. I was awful, worse than you even know, and I heard the recording of that call. I know you heard everything. I know what Mom said too." I turned to look at him, calm, direct. "And then you also know I didn't walk away because of one dinner. It was years and years of being used." Caleb nodded, face pale. "After that, Mom's spa went under, her investor pulled out, she lost the house, I lost my car. We lived off savings until there was nothing left. That's when we finally realized what you'd really done for us." I looked out at the bustling street, heart unshaken. "No, you didn't realize what I did. You just regret that it stopped." He lowered his head. "Maybe, but if there's a chance, I hope I can make things right. Not for money, but because I lost the best sister I ever had." I gave a faint smile. "You didn't lose me. You let go long ago. I just finally accepted it." Caleb's voice cracked. "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" I stood, pulling my coat on. "Forgiveness isn't the same as going back. I don't hold grudges, but I hold boundaries. In family, Caleb, isn't a place that uses love to lie. Real family means love and respect. We weren't that. I pulled out my wallet and placed a $10 bill gently on the bench beside him. Get yourself a warm coffee, but don't get confused. This isn't a restart. This is a proper ending. I turned and walked away, light on my feet. Behind me, Caleb didn't call out, didn't chase, only the Seattle wind brushing past my coat, carrying the scent of sea salt and new beginnings. At the cafe, June was already waiting. As I sat down, she said, "You look different, lighter." Ha. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the hot cocoa she slid toward me. Yeah, for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I owe anyone anything. Madeline's story is a reminder that sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't to forgive, it's to let go. In a world where family ties are often used as a shield for manipulation, she had the courage to walk away from toxic bonds, set new boundaries, and find peace in a chosen family built on real respect. In real life, many are learning this hard truth. Not everyone who shares your blood deserves your love and loyalty without question. What do you think about Madeline's decision? What would you do in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about family and life.